Cool. Well, I'm going to start because we've just got a lot to cover today and I don't want to miss anything. So welcome everyone to today's webinar. So this one is on growing your team by employing staff. My name is Hannah. I'm the project officer here at Beacon for Rare Diseases. I am going to start by giving a really quick intro to Beacon and what we do, a little bit of housekeeping, although I know we're all pretty professional with the online events by this point, but still. And then I'll introduce our speakers and we can move on with the webinar content. So for those of you who don't know us or haven't interacted with us recently, we are called Beacon for Rare Diseases, but we did used to be called Find a Cure. We actually rebranded back in February. We did this because we needed a new identity which better reflects the work that we did. So we have a new vision of no rare journey alone and a new mission to build a united rare disease community with patient groups at its heart. Okay, so that is who we are, but what do we do? So our main work focuses around 3 areas. Our main focus is patient group training. We help groups meet their rare challenges by supporting them to form, grow, and professionalize. Another focus is rare research, where we help patient groups find a place at the heart of research so they can ensure better outcomes and improve access. We also strive to create a rare disease community by facilitating connections and collaboration. So today's webinar is part of the series Developing Your Rare Disease Patient Group from the Bottom Up. We've decided to run this series because we know how crucial it is to have the right people involved in your patient group, no matter what stage you're at. So we did kick the series off last month with the first webinar looking at volunteer recruitment. If you weren't able to attend that, you can find the recording on our YouTube, and I will send it out to everyone in an email following this webinar. And registration is now open for the 3rd webinar in the series, which is happening on the 20th of July, and that one is on succession planning. So again, I'll send out the links and make sure you sign up for that as well. Okay, so on to today's webinar. So today we are going to cover all about growing your team by employing staff. So we're going to look at the key things you want to think about before you employ paid members of staff, the different options you have, like hiring someone on a permanent contract versus the freelance workers, steps you can take to make your organisation attractive to potential employees, and then how to get the most out of your staff. Okay, so on to today's webinar. We have a really great lineup of speakers for you today. We have Kathryn Sullivan, the founder of Miragold, a governance consultancy, and we also have Joe Gums, the CEO and founder of Ocumel UK. So I'm going to pass over to them and they're going to start taking you through some of the webinar. Hi, guys.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm absolutely thrilled to be with you. I'm just having a quick look at the participants who are here live with us today and I actually recognise some of the names. So I'm really delighted to be working again with Beacon on this and to be having some conversation with Joe later on. Joe, I don't know if you want to quickly say hi to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Joe Gums, and yeah, CEO of Ocumel UK. So we've obviously been volunteers initially, and then sort of took the steps to be an employer. So yeah, hopefully something will help.
That's great. Thanks, Joe. And we'll be hearing more from Joe as we go through today. I've got a few slides to share as well, so I'm going to pop those up. So the title, as Hannah said, employing staff to drive your patient group towards its goals. So we're going to be focusing on that. And if you think that I don't cover anything as we go through, then please do use that Q&A function. Hannah's going to keep an eye on it for me as we're going through. Webinars aren't always as interactive as I like them to be in terms of chatting to people, but do use that to ask questions throughout, and then we have factored some time in at the end for you to specifically ask some questions, and Hannah will wrap up for us and make sure you get in touch afterwards with both Beacon and directly with Hannah obviously, but hopefully we'll be sending out the slides for you to have a look at. It's got some links in it and it's got my details on there, so do feel free to get in touch. So hello, this is not me, this is a dog obviously, but this is a little bit about me. So I am a governance consultant, as Hannah said. I've been a trustee myself for 14 years and the chair of Imaginative Theatre Company, which is a charity which works with people with convictions and other disadvantaged groups through the power of theatre to transform lives, which is absolutely amazing. I'm a primary school governor and I'm also a charity CEO. and I've been working with Beacon for just over a year now, which it's been absolutely brilliant to do. A couple of things that I'm not is that I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not an HR professional. I'm coming at this from a perspective of somebody who works with charities of all different shapes and sizes, and having run them myself, about the kind of things that are important to look at. We could spend days and days and days talking about employment legislation and all the things you need to do. We're going to send you links within the content so that you can find things out for yourself. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Jo, who's introduced herself already, but just we're going to have a sort of a bit of a conversational approach to a session in a second, so that we can I can pick her brains about the journey that she's been on with Ocumel. And like I said, if you're live with us and want to say hi, feel free to tell us who you are and what organisation you're from and what sort of maybe stage you're at, so we can bring that into the conversation as we go along. So do use that as interactively as you can, even though we can't see you. So some initial thoughts from me. I want to talk about some clarification, because again, if you get into the legal definitions of things, it can get a bit murky, and we'd be here forever, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to use 4 terms today that I want to just outline. So a volunteer is a person who opts to carry out activities for your organisation, doesn't get paid. And then a trustee is a very particular type of volunteer. So when I use the word volunteer, I am excluding trustees, although of course we know that trustees are volunteers in their own right. You might call them directors or something else, depending on where you're setting up. An employee is a staff member who gets paid to perform tasks, and there are a couple of definitions of that legally, so I want to really be clear that I do include the term worker, and I'll send you a link that'll have all the explanations of what that means later on, but there are slightly different rights and responsibilities with that, so I want to make sure that's clear. And then the last one is freelancer. I'm going to use that general term for anybody who is paid to conduct activities but is not employed by you. People can say an outsourced person, an agency, etc., etc. I just want to use one word for everything, just to make it really simple. So freelancer is the word that I'm going to be using. Each type of those people brings their own considerations, so we're going to not be able to talk about all of them, but we are going to talk obviously about some of the things, such as an employee has rights, and being enrolled in a pension scheme, holiday entitlement, a contract, etc., etc. Things like when you're working with volunteers, that you need to avoid accidentally creating an employee post for them or for freelancers, and freelancers have their own special lot of legislation, which I'm familiar with because this is what I do, called IR35, which you do need to be mindful of. It might not apply to you, but we'll just touch on that as we go through. And obviously trustees specifically need to comply with the Charity Commission guidance. So there are a number of different places that you can go to find information, and that different groups of people will have different types of considerations. So that's just to get that in your minds, so that we know you're clear about when you're talking about a particular group of individuals. Okay, so let's think about when you might want to decide to employ. I'm really sorry, my dog's about to start barking because the postie has arrived on our street, and the dog opposite starts to bark, and then he starts to bark. I'm really sorry. It's always when I'm in the middle of doing a webinar. So my first instruction before I bring Jo in is just to get you to think of what is prompting you to have the question, am I ready to employ staff? So have you got extra funding? Are you concerned that you might have accidentally created an employee role for a volunteer? Have you done some strategic planning and you're thinking you need more a significant delivery? Is it something that's expected of you by stakeholders or funders? Are you relying on volunteers and that's proving to be inconsistent? And are you feeling like your volunteers are being asked to do too much? They might be some of the questions that you're either rattling around your brains at the moment that's prompted you to come today or to listen to the recording afterwards. So I'm going to now bring in Jo and talk about what the kind of things were that prompted her. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can have an actual conversation, Jo. Some of the things that prompted you to think about whether you needed to employ. So do you want to talk about a little bit about your journey?
Yes, so we started 2009. So we're an organisation supporting people with a rare type of cancer, and which we'd lost my dad to. So initially, the first couple of years were quite sort of slow moving. We just helped a few people one-on-one. Another lady came on board. Somebody's just said that they can't hear me. Can everyone else hear me okay?
You are a bit muffled, Jo. I think if you just move your microphone just a little bit further up. Yeah, okay. Perfect. Better. Yes, yeah.
Sorry. So yes, so it started back in 2009, quite small, obviously at that time, and another lady came on board. So we were quite unique that there was sort of two people that were in the similar situation. We wanted to do something, and we set out to do it. And at the time, the other lady was, able to sort of dedicate more time than I was. So she actually became, as the job grew, she became our first employee. I then came on board a few years later, and that decision was really because of the time that you end up dedicating. When you want to sort of set up a charity, you want to do well, but financially you can't afford to leave work to do that work. So for myself, when I initially was a volunteer for a number of years, it was a case that actually I would then work for Ocumel on a Friday, and then dedicate the time, and it just became too much. So I left my previous role to then become a full stroke part-time employee of Ocumel UK. So it kind of just grew organically as the charity grew, and I don't know whether we kind of hoped that one day we would be there, but it was, just the people that we were supporting. We were reaching out to more and more people, and there's only so much you can do whilst juggling everything else on top.
That's great. Thanks so much for that introduction, Jo. So thinking about that specific organic process, what kinds of activities did you prioritize as being the ones that you wanted to pay somebody to do? Like, what was the difference between, I know it was obviously a difference about how much time you had to devote to things, but in terms of the actual tasks, what were they like?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of, the helpline, like we support people through our helpline, and that's always been something that either myself or Kathryn managed until more recently. But yeah, it was just getting to the point where people were fundraising for us. We were receiving donations. We just didn't even have the time to sort of thank them for it. So initially we had a volunteer that was just sort of helping us with admin, sending out new member packs, and kind of over the years, with different volunteers that were working, obviously people's situations changed. So we kind of felt that actually where there's core responsibilities that, as a business, we need them to be fulfilled, they're tasks that are best placed with somebody who's working part-time or full-time, depending on
absolutely. And we'll come to that sort of part-time and full-time thing. I think that is really interesting to think about. But I'd like to unpick a little bit more, if my dog would just be quiet for a second, about those two types of things. So you've got the helpline that you referenced, and then the sort of that not being able to thank fundraisers and the kind of the people that you work with that is very much it's not the delivery of the work that you do, but it's really integral. And was there any conversation about should we focus only on delivery, or is it about that what people call admin that gets a bit of a bad press about, oh, you're spending money on things that are administration?
Yeah, I mean, when we run a membership schemes that we can keep updated with people, we can run consultations with them and things like that. So yeah, when people first sign up to be a member, there's certain things that they would expect. Yes, you get a default email, welcome them to the organisation, but just sort of to send out that initial membership pack where people have got signposting, learn a bit more about the charity. We felt that was just something that actually was quite timely. It needed to be done within a few days, ideally. So that was the first role, just knowing actually that the administration and that the workings of the charity would just be able to keep up. Particularly if you're then supporting people on the helpline, you can't stop doing that to be able to send out membership packs, and have that sort of lifetime conflict all the time. So I think just as you do grow, you kind of we all wear a million hats, but there's some of you kind of have to accept that actually we're not super women or supermen. We just, there'll be different parts of the role that different people can help you with, so that you can expand and sort of move into more pressing work.
I really like that. I just want to pick up on that you're not a superhuman. I think sometimes the work, I mean, I'm absolutely in awe of all of the patient groups that I work with via Beacon, and because of the sheer drive and determination of people. But I think sometimes because of that sort of, actually I should be able to do everything and I shouldn't need to pay somebody else to do it, or I shouldn't need to be paid to do it, or whatever it is. I feel a bit weird. What was your journey like with that?
It's quite hard. I think the thing is, I think anybody that goes into this sector have got that drive, they've got that passion. I've never heard anybody say, I don't know how to do that. so we won't. It just doesn't happen. You know, we all are the type of people that will have to just figure it out. You know, you have to just figure out how to put a website together, create a patient group, you know, and thankfully, obviously now, you know, there's people like Beacon that support people. So yeah, I think that just sort of that mentality doesn't always serve us well, because you just think, well, actually, yeah, you've just got to do it. It's not a factor of actually, well, when shall I do that? Oh, that's outside my schedule. If it needs to be done and it's going to help people, then you know, by nature, you sort of like find your way. So I think there's that mindset. But I think probably for me, it hit home. I actually ended up having a worry with my eyes. So I was in hospital for a couple of days and then needed to rest. And then it's just sort of the light bulb moment sort of kicks in that you think, actually, you know, it's not just about wanting a nice holiday or a day off and things like that. It's actually, if just something happens and you need to take some time out, the organisation needs to sort of think. So I think it's nice actually that the third piece will be about sort of succession planning. So yeah, it's good to just have some good people around you so that you know that you can take time off and the world won't crumble. So yeah.
Yeah, there's already a comment in the chat of somebody nodding furiously in agreement with you there, Joe. I do think that, you know, it's the airline adage, isn't it? You know, you've got to look after see to your own oxygen before you see to somebody else's, and it can be really difficult when the things that you're working towards are so personally linked to you and the connections that you have. You know, you said this was started because of a you know, personal story, and that never goes away. That isn't the same. And I know that you know, when I speak to any charity who's looking to employ for the first time, that is one of the concerns. That is one of the things, like, how is someone going to care about this as much as I do? Because that's what you need to do, is you need to surround yourself with. So how did you approach that passion, that determination piece that obviously you had?
Yeah, I think we, you know, like so once I started as CEO of the charity, the first person that we employed was one of our volunteers. She was the lady that obviously we brought in to sort of thank our fundraisers, do the membership packs, you know, that kind of work. So there was a prior relationship there already. We knew she was incredible. And as we grew, it, you know, just it was that natural progression actually that she could become a part-time member, you know, part-time member of staff. So yeah, I think it's like, obviously when you don't do this kind of thing, you sort of suddenly panic, and I'm always very worried about, you know, what do I, even though she's here, she's doing the role, do I still need to advertise the role? You know, do I need to, you know, it's frightening because sometimes you just, you know, we're all humans, mistakes will happen, but you don't want to make the wrong mistakes. So yeah, just to have a go-to person that you can then just say, actually, you know, am I all right doing X, Y, and Z, or can you guide me on this? Is just really sort of valuable. So I can't actually remember if that was the question you asked me, but hopefully it helped.
Yeah, it was fine. It was the, you know, where do you find someone with a passion? I think that volunteer route in, I think, is really, really valuable. You know, you already, or, you know, so many of the patient groups, you've got these amazing communities that exist. And I think starting there is a nice, gentle way of easing you in. But then, as you rightly said, there is something about the, you know, having to advertise something and actually the benefits of that wider pool. An awful lot of my family work in the charity sector, an extended family, so my brother's family, in-laws and what have you, that really, really connected into that sector as well, so not directly through me. And it's interesting because you know, you can see the minute they go and work for a new charity, their timeline, their newsfeed, their fundraising all becomes about that organisation. So the passion is there because there are 169,000 charities in England and Wales who are registered with the Charity Commission. You know, people are passionate about, you know, charitable organisations and the good that they can do, and they just choose to focus in on the ones that they work with. So that, you know, having that broader pool is helpful, because when you get a staff member in, that does, who's not connected, that does broaden that horizon for your organisation as well.
Yeah, and it's good to sort of like have, you know, have that mix, so that, you know, people that have just not worked in the charity sector, it's okay, because, you know, we're all human, as long as people see the value in what the business is doing. And, you know, yeah, also having people that just, you know, really love working for the charity sector. You know, they want to, you know, earn a wage and feed their families and do everything, you know, that normal people do, but actually they want their, you know, their role to sort of like have meaning as well. So
I was laughing at the normal people comment, because I think that is
people.
but there is something about the people who work, you know, I again, I established my own business, but
Yeah.
I work exclusively with the charity sector. It's not there is something about that that's about the value driven, and later on, after, we are going to have a little bit of a break halfway through just for our own benefit, and but sort of the second half of the session, if you like, I'm going to talk a little bit about you know, attracting the right people to your organization, so that it is that connection and that values fit. Did you have any conversation, obviously the volunteer was already you know, volunteering with you, but did you have any conversation about the way that you wanted things done, as opposed to, here's the jobs that I want you to do?
Yeah, I think, you know, at the beginning you haven't sort of necessarily, you know, I suppose at the very beginning, you know exactly what you want from the charity, so yeah, you've got to put that sort of across. So yeah, our sort of like tone of voice, you know, now is a thing. You know, 10 years ago you just didn't hear about tone of voice. So yeah, I think, you know, having empathy, you know, when you, particularly with fundraising, you know, how do we make it known that actually we appreciate fundraising, but actually not put too many demands on people? You know, what's important, what the sort of values of the charity, I think, all sort of like come through, and normally, you know, quite picked up quite well from the staff that we've recruited.
Yeah, and I think that is often a step that's missing, not just in you know, when you're first employing somebody, but actually, you know, over time, as you get bigger, boards and groups of trustees themselves can feel a little bit disconnected from that delivery work, because you're the experts in the doing of the thing,
Yeah.
the doing the do. I've got a colleague of mine who always calls it doing the do, and getting too focused on that from a board level, from that strategic perspective. Actually, what you're caring about is how people feel afterwards, and that is the difference. You know, you're there to be financially sustainable, but not to make tons of profit and to please shareholders. You're looking to make a difference to people's lives, and how does that manifest itself in your organization compared to someone else's? Is something that I don't think we talk about enough. Have you, since you've employed people, have you found that you've had more of those conversations?
Yeah, I think particularly when we're doing interviews, you kind of just know, you know, just from, it's not even a, you know, yes, you can pull so much from the questions that you ask. But I remember one lady, you know, she was lovely, just before COVID hit, and then, you know, unfortunately she wasn't able to work with us, but straight away she was worried about where she parked. You know, am I okay to park here? And it's kind of like just little things in the conversations that you have with people, sort of almost outside of the interview, that you just get a feel for actually what's important to them, and will they then be a good fit for your organization.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a sense of things that you know, there are ways that you can tease that out in interview questions and conversations, excuse me, but yeah, it is more intrinsic. I think you get better at that the bigger you grow, because you start to spot patterns in that. We've had a question in the chat which I do want to just come on to. So you know, a lot of the challenges around employing people who are volunteers already is that piece that actually you could be connected, you could be a person with a condition that you're supporting, or a family member, and therefore the transition into full-time employment or even part-time employment for some people just isn't going to be possible. Have you done the sort of really open recruitment, and how's that gone for you, Jo?
Yeah, recently we're interviewing at the moment for a new fundraising and communications officer, and it's lovely just seeing different skill sets of people. So, you know, not everybody has to be like us, otherwise the business wouldn't then work. So actually it's nice just having those different personalities, you know, different backgrounds coming through, and seeing sort of how they sort of complement skills that we already have in the team, and actually the areas that we're lacking. So yeah, it can be a daunting process, but I think, you know, obviously you'll be covering steps in stages to make that sort of like less daunting.
Yeah, absolutely. And were there any sort of things that you're really pleased that you did in terms of that open recruitment piece, like a particular approach that you're like, yeah, I'm glad we did it like that?
Yeah, I think, well, we've used an online system called Breathe. We've recently started using sort of like Track Holiday, And through there's a portal which I think is like only £5 a month, but actually just manages all the applications that you have in the different platforms. So actually that has made everything a lot easier. You know, if they were to come into my emails, I would find it really difficult to keep on top of all the applicants that we've had in. So yeah,
and I think that's the thing. There's so much. I'm really a huge fan of Breathe. We shouldn't like be selling products here, but I do think it is designed for small organisations. It's an out of the box plug and play kind of system, which is really, really good. And there are other ones out there, but I think it's recognising that there are these tools, digital tools in particular, available. Because I know that one of the challenges when you go to recruit for the first time is that you are doing that as a volunteer. So you're setting everything up in that sort of like, this isn't my job, this is me doing something on the side in order to get everything ready to move forward, which can be quite difficult. Are there particular ways that you managed that at that time?
I think, well, at the beginning we did, and it was while I was still working full time, but we did use a company to help us with the sort of, you know, legalities of the setup of the organisation. So yeah, you know, registered with HMRC. Obviously the pensions then came a few years later, so we were sort of already up and running by that point. Yeah, I think just sort of like take time out, you know, go through all the processes that you're going to be sort of like covering off today. And yeah, just I think if you're just keeping good people around you, and you know, premises that, you know, the logistics, how are we all going to work together? Obviously it's, you know, it can be different now with COVID. You know, how do you build a team remotely is harder, because you know, to this person that we're recruiting now will be the first person into the team, you know, obviously since COVID's kicked in. So you know, how do we get them to understand the business and what we're about and the communication style, all that kind of stuff remotely? It's just a different way to how we've done it previously.
And I think that's sort of my last bit question for you, if that's okay, Jo, is around that. You know, how does it work if you haven't got premises? Because a lot of patient groups are going to be, you know, run, you know, in community centres or in their own homes, or, you know, through other venues. And then how do you make that transition from having somebody working for you, and what kind of spaces do you need to provide? Do you want to provide? How does that work? How have you managed that?
Yeah, I think we just, you know, when COVID obviously happened, nobody, you know, none of us were particularly prepared for it. So just making sure that people are comfortable at home, you know, that they've got the equipment to make sure that they're sitting properly, you know, back is well supported, that kind of thing. So yeah, you know, from a health and safety point of view, and then, you know, working in an office is obviously different to working on Zoom, but just regular sort of meetings on Zoom, and you kind of just forget that actually you're talking to a screen. It just becomes a bit more natural. So as long as, you know, as long as you're clear in the sort of roles and having sort of defined roles of, you know, of when to pass work over and what to sort of like, you know, keep chat on, you know, keep a check on, you know, that's obviously really important. So I think just keeping communications open, having that regular time slot sort of each week, or set, you know, 15 minutes every day, just to keep on top of what's happening, really does help.
I think that's really, really valuable insight there, Jo, because I think I worked remotely for most of my career. So actually I've been quite fortunate. When the pandemic hit, I was like, oh, this is easy. A very different setup from a lot of people. But some of those things that you don't notice that you're doing when you are in an office, those informal conversations, those sort of drive-by check-ins, those kind of things, you have to create an artificial way of doing those. And I really like that, sort of the regular check-in, even if it's only for a very small amount of time. You're replicating that, and it feels really weird the first few times you do it. You're like, you know, picking up the phone to somebody, or you know, scheduling a Zoom call or whatever with somebody that you might never have actually met, and they're going, I'm just checking in for 10 minutes. Feels really odd, but actually over time that builds up, in the same way that over time in the office people are very nervous and, you know, put on a front in the first week or so and bring their best shoes and all the rest of it. I think it's interesting to
and sort of, you know, traditionally team meetings you would talk about topics, whereas actually the team meetings, you know, just that social conversation is actually an important part of the team meeting.
Absolutely.
You know, updates of what everyone's been working on and everything. So you do have to just sort of like adapt your style, but it works, and it's, the same way that you don't have that travel into work every day, you're just doing, so yeah, it's just sort of like plus and minuses with it all.
It is, yeah, that's really good. Thank you. And you're going to stay on, Jo, aren't you, so that I can pick your brains for some of the other things as we go through. I've seen people have already started looking up the things that we're talking about. So Breathe HR, yeah, there is a basic cost to start off with. And it's the kind of thing that you need to consider. When you're thinking about employing somebody, is how am I going to manage them? And I don't mean the time it takes to manage a person, although that is a factor. If you're already at capacity and you're thinking, right, so therefore I need to bring somebody in. Bring somebody in, you have to use some of that freed up capacity to manage them, but it's also those system things. It's not just the cost of the salary, and I think that's quite important to reflect on. So just keep jumping in as we go. Have you got any last thoughts for people before you?
To me, actually, is try to see where you want the charity to go. If you want to keep small, that's okay. You can Absolutely. Be quite nimble. You could, you manage your own time. So there are benefits in doing that. But if you want to move into research, if you want to move into, big funded applications for different larger projects, you're going to need to build your team, but then you do need to build in that time, because people will leave. And I think, it's be proud if your staff have, developed and then move on.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just do need to plan in a bit more time.
Absolutely. We've got a question in here as well. So about funding would be essential for us to employ someone. And again, thinking about your own financial models, every group has a different financial model, and what you look to do and what you can have access to and what you understand how you can get access to. What would funders pay for? And actually, I find in my experiences that funders will pay for staff more readily than they will pay for other things. Capital projects seem to be really problematic, and actually trying to make people understand the delivery aspect of work and sometimes can be very difficult for funders. But saying I want to employ a person to do this work can actually be really a strong application. It's like everything, I'm not a fundraising expert, and you do have to look into the funding bids, and competition at the moment is absolutely fierce for all funding, but it is available out there. It's also about thinking now, do I want to employ somebody immediately, because I'm at crisis burnout point. I'm hoping that not everyone on the call is in that position, but also some of you might be in the very fortunate position to be thinking about this for the longer term. Actually, do I want to employ someone in 18 months, 2 years time? I can see that I want to grow. I see that I'm going to want to have more put into this particular area of the work that we're wanting to do. And if you do that, then you can plan with your own fundraising. And I think this is the question that I asked Jo before about how do people respond to the admin. I don't call it admin. I find that really difficult. Everybody who works in a charity should be contributing to the charity's cause. There's an urban myth, I'm pretty sure it isn't true, but that somebody was walking through the offices of Cancer Research UK, and they came across a cleaner with their cleaning cart, and they said to them, what do you do? And the response was, I'm curing cancer. Now that pretty sure is an urban legend to make a point, but the point is that connection, that if that cleaner isn't there, then the staff who come in and do the fundraising, who do the legacy development, who are literally researching for cancer treatments and cures, are not going to be able to do their work. So shifting the mindset slightly about why staff, which leads very nicely, I'm loving the questions, into my slides. Would funders pay for a fundraiser? Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think actually if I start sharing my screen, and we'll pop onto some of the things about when it's a staff member that you want to employ and when it's somebody on a different basis, because I think that's actually really timely in terms of the question. So, like, are you ready? There are a few things that you need to think about. Is it that you're ready now, and then it's a burning platform that actually you're needing to do this immediately, or are you getting yourself into that position where you're going to be set up to do the employing of somebody? And there are a few things that you need to make sure that you've got in place in order to be physically ready. And I'm sure Jo will jump up with some of the things that she learned along her way. So if you are going to employ somebody, first of all, the first thing you've got to check is, does your governing document allow you to employ staff? So you might be set up in a way that means that you can't, and that your organisation itself doesn't exist in the way that they can employ staff. So you have to check that your powers exist in your governing document. So that's your constitution, your rules, your memorandum and articles of association, depending on how you've been set up, will depend on what you want to do with that. So that's the first place that I would look. If your governing document doesn't say that you're able to do that, you might be in a position where you are personally employing somebody, and that just raises a whole load of other questions. So I would definitely start looking at that to make sure that you are ready to employ somebody in the first place. You need to register with Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and I've put all the links into the slides, that when you get them you can just go directly to the pages that you need to go to in order to do that. But you need to register as an employer, and that's to make sure that tax information is being done properly. It's not just having a go at you as the employer, it's making sure that the staff members are paying the right amount of tax, they're not being double taxed, that pensions are being looked after, national insurance contributions. It can have a massive impact on people's future work history if they don't have that. I was once, as a student, very unfortunate enough to work for an organisation who didn't register, and I almost got myself into a pension difficulty with my national insurance contributions, but luckily I was made aware of it, so I was able to rectify that. But that's not a position that you want to be doing. Pensions, Joe mentioned it before, you employed just before the auto-enroll pension system came in, but every single employee is entitled to be automatically enrolled into a pension scheme. I know nothing about pensions, that would terrify me, but there is a really simple walkthrough guide on the government website to help you to understand how that works, and you don't have to create your own pension. It's not like you're not investing suddenly in these things, but it'll walk you through how to do that. But everyone's entitled to it. People can opt out, that's totally fine, but it's got to be there and it's got to be offered to them, so that's something to make sure that you're considered. Health and safety compliance. So we've talked about, Joe mentioned there, about working from home. Actually, as soon as you work from home, it becomes a place of work and is therefore subject to slightly different legislation. Again, I'm going to tell you all the things that I'm not an expert in. I'm not an expert in health and safety either. It will not surprise any of you. But you need to understand a basic risk assessment. Are they in a position where they are going to be safe, be able to continue to do their work? And in the absolute worst case scenario, am I going to get sued because they've tripped over a wire, or their wiring wasn't good enough, or their the way that they were sitting gave them repetitive strain injury, or something else? Like, you've really got to think about how that's set up and what you're responsible for and what you are not responsible for. So thinking about those kinds of things. What do I do if the money runs out, which is kind of linked to the chat questions that we've had so far, is making sure that you have money to not only pay them, to contribute to their pension, to do national insurance, to pay the tax as eligible on that salary, but also if I need to make them redundant, or if I need to change how that works, there is a process involved, there is a cost involved, purely by having a member of staff that's not about their salary, that doesn't go into their pockets. And again, it's one of the reasons I get really cross when people say admin costs, because these are all costs that are incurred in order to make sure that you've got people who can do the work and to deliver that activity. So having a really secure funding plan for that money. We know right now that it is a job seekers market right now at this very moment in time. The charity sector is not immune to the Great Resignation, even though lots of people were leaving organisations with limited value driven basis, shall we say, and wanting to do good. Doesn't mean that they want to work for no money. It doesn't mean they want to work in bad conditions. They certainly don't want to work in a position where they don't feel safe. So money security is on everybody's mind right now. Cost of living crisis, we know, is started. It's only going to get worse. Sorry to be the voice of doom and gloom, but that is a reality that we have to be aware of, so that if you're going to be advertising a 6-month post, I can tell you right now that you will get very limited applications, because people want that security. If I lose my job, what is going to protect me in a 6-month contract? People know it gives you no job security. It gives you no employment rights. Many of them kick in at 2 years. So thinking about those kind of things, what's your strategy for having that in there? Insurance. So do you have employer's liability insurance? That is the single one that I would definitely get. Insurance companies might try and sell you a range of other ones, and I can say that my husband works for an insurance company. They might try and sell you a range of other insurances, including key person insurance. But actually, you on the call might be, Jo, certainly I would be considered to be a key person in her organisation. But thinking about that, the premiums do not need to be high, but it's one of the things that you want to factor in to that. Great question in the chat. You are absolutely responsible for the safety of volunteers, but the extent to which you're responsible for those that safety is different. So you know, they don't have the same rights and responsibilities for things like, you know, the health and safety piece about when, like, you're working, if you provide equipment to a staff member, as opposed to a volunteer using their own laptop. They're just really different nuances around that. And yes, you probably have public liability insurance as if you're doing any activities with volunteers, and particularly if you operate out of community centres and what have you, often require you to have that. But it's just making sure that you've got the right level of employer's liability insurance, because you can get sued differently. And that's a really worst case scenario. And, you know, we obviously hope that we don't get anywhere near that, but it's really something that you need to be cognizant of now before you get to those positions, so that you've got everything in place for it. So although discrimination is obviously not moral, but it's also you know, illegal, the harm that's caused is deemed legally to be different if it's a volunteer or if it's an employee. If you discriminate, if employment discrimination carries with it higher levels of liability, and less burdens of proof as well. So you have to think about those. I'll leave Hannah to answer that question in the chat. I'll read them out, Hannah, if that helps. So the three questions that we've got in the Q&A session currently are: funding would be essential for us to employ someone. Is funding available to pay staff, and if so, where? Secondly, would funders pay for a fundraiser? And then the last one is: aren't you just as responsible for the safety of volunteers as employees? So just covering off those questions as they come in. It might be that as individuals send them through, they just are visible to me and Hannah and Jo. So there are some practical considerations, but you also then need, and Jo touched on this, you need to think about the job itself. So are you clear on what the job is that you want to advertise? How would you describe it? Is it even a job? You know, people have to recognize it as a thing. How are you going to know what skills are needed if it's something that is because you don't have those skills? So I've been very open that fundraising is not my bag. I don't have any experience of doing it, and certainly not from a strategic fundraising perspective. So how on earth am I going to be able to establish what those skills are that are needed for a good fundraiser? So you need to do a bit of research into the particular area that you're looking for. Depending on what you're looking for, you might be looking for just some general support, which you can categorize into a number of different ways, and then talk about what you need from that. But you might need to be a bit clearer around the actual job itself. Salary. So obviously we have some minimum wage requirements, like legal obligations. As we know, cost of living crisis is not going to touch the sides of that. So there's living wage. And then there's the real living wage. And I'd recommend, if you want to know the difference, the jump in that is go and look at the Real Living Wage website. Tons of information about that. And they sneak up on you, the rises. So they have been going up. And it is important that you are aware of those obligations when you pay somebody minimum wage. But also what that does, and we'll talk about this in the second half, but about how people see you as an organisation and what they do they want to come and work for you, what kind of skills are you going to get for that, and what's that going to look like and what's that going to feel like. So you need to think about all of that and do a little bit of research. So if you're recruiting for a communications person, what are other charities paying? And what does that job description look like? What are they doing? Trying to have a conversation with other organisations who already employ, I think would be really good. Jo, on those kind of things, do you want to chip in? Is there anything on there particularly?
Yeah, I think it's hard, especially at the beginning. It is hard dividing out those roles. Yeah. So, you know, most things, obviously, we do them for the first time. You know, whether it's, well, everything basically. So yeah, I regularly look to see what other charities my size and larger are doing.
Yeah.
You know, how do they word things? What kind of, you know, go into the About Us team, you know, what do their staff sort of like organization structure look like? And yeah, you sort of like think, okay, well, my immediate need is a fundraiser or a grant officer or an admin person. You know, that's going to be my next role. And I've normally got the next 2 or 3 roles lined up in my head, and they will change.
Yeah.
You know, last 6 months ago, I thought, okay, we need this person, and you know, yeah, the situation sort of changes, and so you know, our next role will be a grants officer.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking at what others do, looking at what they like. I've noticed recently people are saying like family friendly on the job description, or you know, about us as an employer, that they are sort of like family friendly. So different things, different wordings that company use just to sort of make you stand out from other employers will help. And yeah, I think just, you know, being attractive to sort of recruit those right people. But just look at
we'll
what
come back to
people
that towards the end. We're definitely going to do that. Like, how do you become, why call it an employer of choice? Really excited about working for you. That's definitely part of it. Okay, so who will manage them? So you get a staff member in, they're just going to kind of let them get on with it. There's a whole thing around that. And again, you know, Jo talked about her journey around the first staff member and what that felt like and looked like, and coming on herself and you know, being paid to do things can make that leap easier. But it's quite often for the first staff member, it's a trustee that does it, and they're not getting paid, and that in itself presents problems. So you've got to think about how that's going to work in your organisation, as to I'll do some of the what you manage and some of the processes, and I've got some templates for you and all the rest of it. But just you've got to think about that before you even like begin to write an advert. And then how will you know that they're doing a good job? So go back to that. Are you clear on what you're looking for? Like, what is the reason that they exist? And then how are you going to know if that's working for you as an organization? So there's some things that you need to look at. And therefore, isn't it just easier to get a lot of freelancers in, right? There's definitely a thing about that. Now, obviously, I'm a freelancer, so maybe there's a little bit of bias there in this, but what I would say is that they come with their own sets of challenges and considerations. So it's not like it's an easy option and that you just wash your hands of all responsibility. Freelancers' rates are different. So one of the things that we talked about, and Jo talked about burnout and being able to take breaks and to be able to schedule time, all apply to freelancers. There's no entitlement to sick pay, maternity pay, bereavement leave, any of those things that you would get if you were an employee. Also something to think about if you're employing people, all those things of leave that you have to account for. And therefore, a freelancer's rates will incorporate those kinds of things into them. You're not paying their tax, you're not paying their national insurance, so the rates look really weird. And I remember working with an organization who'd never had a freelancer before, and it became really clear to me when I was working with them this would be a really helpful addition to their processes, and they absolutely balked at the hourly rate. They just kind of looked at it and was like, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine, like, they're being paid as much as the chief exec. And when we broke it down, we were like, they're not being paid as much as the chief exec because this is what they're doing. So trying to get your head on those kind of things is really important if you're going to do that. IR 35, Inland Revenue 35, is a piece of legislation that came in. They paused it through the pandemic, but they've kicked it into position. If you are in receipt of any public funding, you have to comply. And also if your organisation's over a certain size, you have to comply. So that's really important if you do receive funding externally. I'll come back to Jo's question in a second to read it out. But it is something that the responsibility has been shifted from lying with the freelancer to lying with the organisation. So you have to be confident that you are not going to fall foul of accidentally making your freelancer a contracted member of staff. I'm just going to read out what Jo's put in the chat, so into the questions, sorry. So the comment is, we use freelancers a lot. I've been told by our accountant that freelancers must be able to ensure that they can provide a replacement for themselves if they're sick. Do you know what the rules are around that? It is one of the markers, but it's not the only marker. Unfortunately, I'm going to keep my political head out of this. When the legislation was drafted, it didn't make an awful lot of sense. So there are some significant gaps there was an online tool that freelancers could go through, and employers could go through and say, answer a load of questions, and that would give you you are likely to be creating a contract here, or no, you are likely to not be creating a contract. Line management responsibility is one. So are they managing somebody else's work? Providing a substitute, and it's not that they can provide, but it's that they have the right to provide. So you can't demand that it's me that delivers your work. It's that way around. So I have a pool of associates, and I can offer that. The employer can turn them down if they want to, but I have the right to. You can't demand it's me. And insurance and a load of other things that are in place. Do you work for only one employer, or do you work for multiple ones? So it was designed to stop the likes of Uber, if I'm quite honest, those kind of organizations, the gig economy kind of, they were doing everything as an employer, controlling people's hours and rates and making them be available, etc., but without giving them any of the rights of leave and pay and all the rest of it. So it was designed to stop that, and it just ignored a whole section of freelance consultants in the middle. The two interim chief exec roles that I've taken on as an employee, because it is too much hassle to try and work out how that is not going to fit in those categories. So really thinking about the work. Obviously, like I said, I'm a big fan of freelancers. You've just got to know this stuff. Going to an accountant is a really good way of doing it, because they know how the tax works, and they're quite often freelancers themselves. In how I'm talking about them, you're contracting them in to do a piece of work, so they do understand how that works, and they shouldn't be charging you huge amounts of money to give you specialist advice on that. What you do lose with a freelancer is control. So you're not controlling them. When I work with a client, I want to make sure that they're really happy, so I bend over backwards to make that happen. But equally, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, and I don't have to think about working with you again on a daily basis. I don't have to respond in a way that an employee might respond to some of the things that you're doing. But what you do get is a lot more experience in many cases, and that's specialism, and not having to pay for, let's use the accountancy example. To pay for an accountant to come work with you would cost you an absolute fortune. You don't need them to come work for you full time. It's a way of being able to do that without having to be responsible for that pay. So you're doing that. The agility, so being able to say to somebody, right, we've got a bit of cash that's come in, I need some work that's done, can you go and do a 1-month project on our social media? Can you design our website? Can you do a governance review? Whatever it is that you want them to come in and do, and then you don't have to pay them again. So that agility for you as an organization is really, really helpful as well. So if you do find a funder, going back to, I think it was Sue's question earlier about will funders pay for different members of staff, and they might do if you're in particular stages of your organizational development. So that, if you want somebody to write funding bids for you, they might say, well, because it's part of startup costs and we'll pay for it for this amount of time. Employing someone isn't going to be a healthy way to do that. So it gives you that agility to respond to things. The things you have to think about is that you absolutely 1000% need a contract. Freelancers mainly have their own contracts, but they are, of course, and I will say this, they are designed to protect them. So you need to make sure that you've got the ability to look over a contract, get it checked, make sure you're happy with it. What happens when things go wrong? I've got a whole section on that later on, but that's the thing you need to think about now. They should provide their own insurance, and that would be a clause that I would expect to see in any contract that I was given on behalf of an organisation, is what insurance do I have in place to make sure that the advice I'm giving you is the right one. I've put in a load of links here to the things that I've talked about. So HMRC registration, the government has 2 step-by-step guides, getting ready to employ somebody, and different categories of people in your organisation, and I think they're both really, really helpful. The step-by-step guide is exactly what it says on the tin. You just walk through it bit by bit, and it'll ask you, are you ready? Do you have money? All those kind of organic questions. Separately, there are 2 pieces I think are really helpful for you to have a look at on the Charity Commission website. One is about employing staff, and that's the guidance around, have you got the power to do that? What does that look like? What's your responsibilities as trustees? And then also that managing volunteers guidance to make sure that you're not accidentally creating this process of an employment contract accidentally with somebody. Just looking, there's another question. So would freelancers, would you not ever draw up a contract or letter of agreement with them? So I think I've covered that, is that I would absolutely write everything down that you're expecting from them. And you can dictate certain things and you can't dictate others, but the freelancer will tell you. And again, if you've got a general understanding of what will tip somebody over into an employment contract, then that will help you to shape that. But no freelancer wants to be unexpectedly classed as employed by an organisation, because the tax nightmare, which I'm currently going through, and because I am employed by another organisation, is really complicated. So that people really want to know how that manages. It meant that it's not in their best interest to make that fudged. It'll be an accident that it happens, and you just want to avoid that if you can. So there's a comfort break scheduled for there. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Jo, have you got anything before we go into that? Just a couple of minutes to cover.
Yeah, I think just the links that you gave were perfect. Because they just contain all of the information you need. If you're not sure about something, sometimes, particularly I'm dyslexic, so reading lots and lots and lots of text about a subject isn't my favourite thing to do. So just pick up the phone. I've always found HMRC, Charities Commission, really helpful. There's a guide on there. So I think you download some software when you initially doing like payroll. So practically, how do you do that? And that's all on the HMRC website, so that you can calculate it all. We now use a company. I'll share my email address in a moment, so I'm happy to sort of give out companies who we found have been useful sort of over the years, and I can sort of happy to share my email and share all of those. So we use a HR company that have sort of helped that process, and a separate payroll company. So I think just as you grow, you realize the sort of areas that you can offload to other people to worry about. So we don't have to do it. I think we've got.
I do like that. Offloading is a great sentence.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm happy to continue on. I did schedule a very quick break there, just in case people needed to get away from their screens. But Jo, I don't know if you're happy to just continue on. Yeah, we have covered quite a lot, but we do still have quite a bit to go through. So I'm just going to bring these back up, and we'll just ignore the fact that we're not taking 3 minutes. So moving on. So you've done all that kind of like, am I ready to employ staff? I've managed to hire somebody. I'm very excited. I found the funding for it, and they've started with me. And I want to talk a little bit now about how you get the most out of them. So you've hired them for a reason. Jo, do you want to share your experiences about how you found that process of getting people to give their best?
Yeah, I think in the job, or or sort of at interview stage.
Well, either if interview stage helped you with that, yeah.
Yeah, I think just at the interview, I'm quite a relaxed person. For me, it really doesn't matter if you're at work at 10:09 or at 9 o'clock, as long as people do their hours, and the job is done. And that's just the way sort of I think. So I think, think about probably, what kind of employer do you want to be? What's important to you? Is time, really vital because of, like a helpline, because of the opening times on a helpline or something like that? Is it sort of like time critical? Are you flexible? Do you need what kind of things would you want your staff to run past you? So if somebody's made a dentist appointment, I personally don't need to know. I'm quite flexible with my team. They're absolutely fantastic. I've just love them to bits. So yeah, I think that's my style of managing. It's what I've done previously, so I could this was sort of like natural movement to me. So yeah, I think you can either ask really difficult questions or put them at ease. You will get a sense of what type of person they are, and what type of person you are, and sort of go from there, really.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jo. And I do think it's very similar to the idea of employing somebody. It's that giving up of control. When you've been used to doing it yourself, it's going to be harder for you than it would be if you were in an organisation already and employing somebody. Giving up that control can be really difficult. So just be mindful of that. It's not a criticism. It's totally normal human behaviour.
And actually, when you do bring people on board, you're bringing them in for their experience. So, sometimes people are like, oh, no, whatever you think is right. And it's like, no, guys, this is what you're being paid for, and we're
Exactly
paying for their experience.
Yeah.
So actually, if we were just going to bring in their experience and then do my own thing anyway, it's a wasted opportunity, So yeah,
Absolutely.
lots of different things when we're tackling something new. You get a feel for actually what's the right approach for us. How would we be benefiting our people the most by
definitely.
what we're doing, and then you go from there.
Yeah, it's very apt today, but why get a dog and bark yourself? Is the adage. Yeah. So the 4 things that I look at, if is how much commitment do they have? Like, what is the commitment? Like, how many hours are they working? Those kinds of things. But also, you can find that out in the interview. That's the thing I look for most in an interview. Recruit for value, train for skills, because you can provide them with training. What's their competency level? And being really honest, you have to build a relationship with a staff member so that you know what their competencies are and aren't, which can be tricky in a field that you know very little about. So you're going to have to become a bit better at some of the fields that you maybe don't understand as well. And listen to them as experts in that area to tell you what's going to work and what's not going to work. Then what support are you going to be able to give them, and what tools do they have to do their job? They're the 4 areas that I would look at. You can see the dog theme today. I'm really just I was never a dog person, and I got one and fell in love with them, so they're all over my presentations. But managing expectations is the first thing that you have to do. Managing your own expectations. Sometimes people, I can work with people, they get a staff member and they think they're going to revolutionize the organization, or they think that fundraising, having a funder, grant writer in, for example, is going to mean that every single application that they ever apply for, they're going to be successful, they're going to get millions of pounds, it's going to be amazing. And if that's your expectation, you're going to be disappointed, and it's not a reflection on the individual. It's about not understanding how that bit of the world works. So managing your expectations first, but also managing theirs. What do you expect of them? What do you want them to be doing? How do you want them, exactly as Joe said, to let you know if they're going to the dentist, or do you expect them to schedule things like that, in work time, outside of work time, all those kind of things. And again, I'm quite like Joe. I'm a big believer that people should be able to self-manage if they want to. If they don't want to, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. But also, I think that the idea of having to schedule dentist appointments and things outside of work time just makes it really difficult, and it actually impacts on people's health. Yeah, all those kind of things really important. A little Venn diagram. I like a Venn diagram. There are 3 things for me that really help you to know if a staff member is doing well and can help them to be at their best and to shine. All the things that you saw in their interview and thought, yes, I want you for my organization. These are the things that will help you. So having objectives, so having a thing that they are working towards. Having training and support that will upskill them, allow them to do that thing, move forward those objectives. And it's all underpinned by the culture of the organization, which you probably, if you're at patient group stage with not employing somebody, you haven't really thought about. Again, similar to the values conversation, it's all interlinked. What is the culture? What do we want to be, and how does that manifest itself? So let's take them one by one. So objectives, clear expectations is what needs to get done and by when. And most importantly, why? So I want you to respond to these fundraisers. They've sent in some money, and I want you to send them an email. I want you to respond to them and thank them, is one way of putting it. But I want you to respond to them within this time frame, because I want them to feel really special. I want them to feel that they know how grateful we are. That is a different way of then how someone's going to write an email to somebody, or pick up the phone to somebody, or send them a message on social media, or whatever it is that you do to thank your volunteers. It also helps somebody to suggest things. So you might be like, oh, and if they raise X amount of money, should we send them something? Should we invite them into our organization? Should we make them, whatever it is that you want to do? The objectives allow you to manage that performance, because you can see what you've asked them to do and whether it's got done. It's a really simple sort of task way of doing things. Doesn't mean you be a dictator about it, but it just means that you've got it written down. And it's all supported by the training development. So once you've written the objectives, you can say, right, where are the gaps? What do we need to make sure I've got, or you've got, that will let you do the job really, really well? So training, it's really often overlooked, mainly because people think it's going to cost them a fortune. So it's very much supports the delivery of the objectives. You can't expect someone to come in as a fully fledged expert in absolutely every area of the job that you've just created, because if so, they'd have left that job and have gone into a new one. So you're going to find somebody at the starting end of of their experience levels. So it doesn't need to be costly. It can include reading material, it can include mentoring. There are a ton of mass online open courses, and Future Learning is one that I've used a lot of times that can upskill people for free, completely for free. People just need to have time put aside to think about what training am I going to need and how's that going to impact the organization. And then everything, like I said, is underpinned by the culture of the organization. If you run on burnout, then so will your staff, because they'll model themselves on you. Like Joe said, they'll say to you, oh, you must know this, the answer to this, right? You must know, because that's how people will look to you in that way. You might not feel that way. You might feel that's like, why are you looking at me? That's really weird. I remember the first time I had a staff member who was like, I'm just copying what you do. And I was like, why would you do that? Why would you copy what I did? And it can be really kind of off-putting, but people will do that. You and the trustees will set the tone of the organisation. And if you deliver what you say, the staff will deliver what they say. If you say to somebody, I'm going to send you on a training course and it's going to be amazing, and you do, they're going to be like, wow, I'm going to repay that by being amazing at my job. Like, it happens time and time again. If you value their time, and if you recognise that their time is valuable, and tell them that their time is valuable, and give them the tools to value their own time, then they will value yours and the organisation's time. Okay.
Yeah, and I think actually on the sort of like burnout sort of topic, or the culture, and around sort of like expectations, that my team do have core working hours. So as long as they're keeping up to date with what they're, if they're not going to be there or things like that, that's absolutely fine. But they don't need to ask beforehand. But yeah, I think just, my team know that, I work past 2 o'clock on an afternoon when they've, finished work. So, if I'm sending an email and it's like, when you get a moment, can you do such and such? I've let them know. Obviously, they know I'm still working. I don't expect them to be logging on doing it that afternoon. So I think just having those sort of like boundaries and sort of expectations, nice and ahead in advance, really does.
There's a load of discussion on social media at the moment actually about that exact schedule send argument, and it's whether or not if you respond outside of someone else's working hours, whether that it creates an implicit burden on them. And there's something about power dynamics. So if I'm the chief exec and I'm sending an email at 4 a.m, unless I'm abroad and there's a time difference, that sends a signal that that's okay to be doing that. Now, I could be a chief exec who's also got caring responsibilities, and actually I am up at 4 a.m, and then I go for a sleep in the middle of the day. And as long as I've told staff that I go for a sleep in the middle of the day, then that's a different conversation than if I'm doing that. If I got an email from a staff member at 4 a.m, I'd be really concerned. I would be like, I would need to understand that system better for me to not panic about their well-being. Schedule send can feel really weird because then you suddenly get a load of emails at the same time. Sometimes working offline can be helpful. So if you've got a load of emails, I tend to send emails in one go. I'm doing an interim role and part-time. I get on an email, I go, right, I'm going to send these 5 emails to Helen now, because she's in my mind. I'm doing all my Helen related things are being done now. I need to have that conversation with Helen to say, this is the impact that's going to have it. I'm not having a go at you because I've sent you 5 consecutive emails. Dialogue is really, really important in all of those things. Okay, so I've put in an example objective template. This is not best practice. I hate the term best practice anyway. It is just what a thing that I start with, and then I work it out from there. So you've got an objective on one side. So an objective might be to provide a high standard of communication between stakeholders and our charity, leading to positive relationships. That's the what and the why. What actions can I help to achieve this? Right, an auto reply function's been established. We've got a script for when anybody has an inquiry about our organisation. We've got a social media presence established. It's kept up to date and it's engaging, and we've developed a newsletter. So they might be some things. I would also put dates next to those if I was doing this live. Just didn't think it was necessary to make all the writing too small on this. What behaviours are going to help to achieve this? I'm going to come to behaviours in a second. A positive response to queries. I'm going to find solutions to problems, and I'm going to share information in a timely fashion. And the update this month, right, so I've done all my processes for social media, auto replies, email and telephone. I'm researching what social media is going to be best for. I'm not there yet, but that's what I'm doing. And I've got the newsletter template. I've now sent it, and that's now in your box to be checked. That's the kind of thing for either a communications type of person or a general support or administrative function to do. They're the kind of things that you might want to start with. And then underneath that, I would have an example training objective. So my training objective is to upskill in social media marketing, like in order to do that objective that we've just outlined. So I'm going to go on a social media marketing course. It's over the course of a month, and it's from the Academy HubSpot, and it's free. That is a real one. So if anybody's looking for something, I started to put an evaluation in the template, and I thought I better not do that because actually I've not been on it. I don't want to either endorse it or say it's rubbish. But actually evaluating your training is really, really important to be able to build over time. So if you send someone on a training course, or you give them a book to read or a mentor, and it's not worked out, you really, really need to know that so that you can not send them on it again. Or you might find this amazing thing that's free and you want to share it with everybody and go, this is incredible, let's all go on this. So really having that, so hopefully you can see how that links into the objective. And then I do, like I said, I want to talk about behaviours as well. Children cry, dogs bark. But the behaviours that you set are the first time I ever got into a conflict management process as a manager in an organisation years and years ago, was because the person was doing the work. There was no problem with the actual delivery of the tasks, but their behaviour was appalling. And it was really difficult because they actually said to me in their one-to-one, you can't tell me how to behave. You can imagine how that went down. Joe's face is a picture. But actually, on reflection, when and this was, like I said, it was absolutely years ago. It was very much the start of my management journey. But actually, we hadn't talked about what we expected in that organisation. In terms of behaviours, and bad behaviours had been perpetuated. Sulking, like literally ostracizing people, not talking to people because they disagree with them in a work meeting, which I find absolutely bizarre. Letting personal relationships getting in the way, all those kind of things were actually, when I looked at the organisation, were actually existing there. So capturing behaviours as part of objectives in a positive sense is actually a really good way of setting that culture. So if we go back to the objective template, you can see these are the things I want you to have an auto reply function. But if the auto reply function says I'm busy, you're not going to hear from me for 3 days, it's not going to lead to positive responses. It's those kinds of things are really, really important to say, this is what I want you to do, and this is how I want you to do it. So they're there, and again, over time you can link those directly to your values. So the last organisation I was working with, they'd revitalized their performance management framework, their values. They were really strongly, actually the staff really felt those values, and one of them was solutions focused. So collectively we came up with, okay, what does solutions focus look like to different employees? Actually, it was about finding solutions to things. So if somebody came to me and said, I don't know how to do X, Y, and Z, it's not okay for me to say you need to go and sort that out. It is okay for me to say, let's go and find this out together. And that kind of, what that led to. So I think they're really important to look at behaviours. I will tell you now that if you don't manage behaviours at the beginning, you cannot then go back in and try and unpick those behaviours. It is, going back to the dog analogy, and once you've taught a dog a bad behaviour, they don't know why, and you can't blame the employee if they're behaving in a particular way and you don't want them to. It's not just for staff, it's everybody. Trustee boards don't look at their own objectives, they don't look at their own goals. Why am I doing things? What are our behaviours? And they're all interlinked, and the more you can be consistent across your organisation, the better it is for everybody, because people can see that being modelled, they can aspire to be those people. It's amazing how much you'll find that people who work with you, volunteers and staff alike, will really, really look up to your trustee board. And again, you might not think that that's a thing, and you might get really uncomfortable about it, but they're gonna. So if they're going to, then model the behaviours that you want to see, which includes saying no to things, saying when you don't know something, and having boundaries around your time, which might feel uncomfortable for you in some ways. It's absolutely for your volunteers, and I'm sure you've got lots of processes already in place for your volunteers. And to shortcut, without it being a negative shortcut, if you've got things that you use for your volunteers, replicate them but for staff. So, how do you make your volunteers feel really special? Right, well, how can that be staff members? They're no different just because they get paid, etc. So you can really pick those things up. Joe, have you got any comments on that sort of wider piece across the rest of the organisation?
Yeah, it's just having that sort of judgment, because the thing is, you want with team meetings, for example, initially we'd invite all our volunteers to the team meetings because they were part of the team, but you also don't want to like pressurize people into thinking that they have to turn up and then listen whether you're going to be doing, you know, X, Y, or Z. So yeah, I think just sort of using that judgment so that people know that they're valued. I mean, you know, there are only so many hours in a day, so it's probably one of our weaker areas. You know, I value our volunteers immensely. Do they know that? I would hope so, but there's probably more I could do, you know, if sort of speaking honestly. So yeah, I think just you know, be kind to yourself, and you know, where people, you know, just keep regular contact with people, and you know, where you can. The lady that we're now recruiting the post for, she was the main contact for our volunteers. You know, so how do we do that going forward? Obviously we need to look at. So you know, things will just keep changing, so I think as long as you sort of keep those lines of communication open, it's really important.
Yeah, and what I would say as well is that I'm sure your volunteers do know, because it's about your behaviours. Actually, that's the thing that people, you know, if I get a thank you card as a volunteer and I've not had any actual contact with somebody and they've treated me really badly and they've not got back to me, I don't care about the thank you card. I care about whether they've done that. So those, also don't beat yourself up over that either. We have a tendency to do. I've got a question in the chat. I'm going to come back to at the end if that's okay. Sorry, question in the Q&A about paying trustees, and I will cover that, but just not right now if that's okay. I want to get through all the slides. So you need to work out whether your employment situation has been successful or it hasn't. A couple of things before I go into what happens if things go wrong. You need to be able to measure that success. It's really, really important to say, right, what is it? And some things are the task has been done. Some things are the task has been done well, and you need to work out what the difference is. But going back to what's the post for? Why did you employ someone in the first place? Have those things been alleviated, extended, successful? Are you happy with those? That's the first starting point. Go back to your objectives and gathering feedback. So gathering feedback from your volunteers, from your beneficiaries, from your stakeholders, from your funders. Do they think it's gone well? Because there's no point if you and your staff member think, yeah, we've done a great job, and everyone's asked that. Oh, awkward. So what does success look like for them as well? And talk to the staff member. Do they think it's gone well? Like 99% of times when you have a challenge with a staff member, if you say, how do you think that's gone? They often say, actually, that hasn't gone as well as I'd liked it to be, and here's why I think. And for me, even if the here's why is I dropped the ball, I would rather take that person on that journey after that point, because they've recognized the things. The ones I can't deal with are the ones who go, well, I think that was successful, even though it's blatantly obvious it's not, and we've had the conversation. So just really quickly going to I've just checked that it's Hannah put in the chat question in the chat, so I was just checking there wasn't another question quickly. What about if things do go wrong? I think this is one of the things that people get very nervous about when employing staff. Like, get advice. There are a number of places that you can get advice. I'll put a direct link to ACAS, which I can never remember exactly what it stands for, but it helps anybody, any organisation, work out whether their processes for dispute resolution are going to be helpful. It's the second tab along on their website. Go and have a look. It's free. Phone line, pick them up, and they will go through things with you. They're there to stop things getting messy in the employment legislation system, so it saves money by having that service there. They also have a ton of templates around things like grievance procedures, disciplinary policies, all those kind of things, so you can have a look at those things. And we'll do that question in a minute. Outsourced HR support. I have relied on that a number of times. They are objective. They are separate to the organisation. If you find one who specialises in working with charities, they're usually incredibly cost effective. Values driven people who have upended a load of really horrible policies and then made them humanised. All those kinds of things that exist. There are a number of packages I know that you can get now where you can pay for a very small amount of money a month or over a year, and then you get unlimited access to a telephone hotline, helpline, those kind of things and templates. Do you use one, Jo?
Yeah, so we've used a company called Abbey HR. They were known to my brother. He runs his own business, so they were recommended to us, and they've just been amazing. And like you say, they're small rates for charity. So I think, for the support that they give us, it's immensely worth its value. You get all your templates, standard letters. It does save an awful lot of time, and you can just ring them for help if you need to.
That's the bit that I think is really knowing that you've got someone on the end of the phone. It's the risk versus reward piece. So you're paying out the money, but you're stopping yourself getting in a tribunal situation. That's nobody wants that. Having a trustee with HR experience, for anyone who's been on my Recruiter Rare Board program knows that I'm not a big fan of oh, here's my HR person. But actually, if you've got people who haven't, so if I'm on a board, I know enough about HR to be able to know when we can do it ourselves and when we need to get help. And it's that bit. It's not necessarily someone who's like an HR professional, but someone who can understand that. The board have a role to play. Usually complaints that come from an employee bypass the chief exec in a small organization, because they're going to be about them, really, because it's about their work. So they come to the trustee boards. They've got to know what that process looks like. What does a grievance procedure look like? How do I deal with that? And I'm a volunteer. So what's the timing like that? It's different from if you're a staff member. Take your time. If it's going wrong or it's gone wrong, don't go in gung-ho being like, we need to sort this out. I need to fire somebody. I need to do what. Just spend some time working out what's happening, talking to the staff member, finding out. There could be a ton of things that's happening. What are you asking of them? Is it legitimate that you're asking them to do a particular thing? Is it possible? What training and support have you offering, and are you continuing to offer? Are there mitigating circumstances for their employee? If they're going through something at home and they have not told you, like, what's happening there? What adjustments can you make? There could be an undiagnosed disability. There could be a hidden disability. They don't have to tell you all the things, but actually, if you start a dialogue and they trust you, they might start to say, well, actually, if I could just drop off my children, then I would feel like I was in a better position to do whatever. And then how has the management process gone? If you're being managed by a trustee, has that been positive? Have you stuck to all your schedules? Have you met with them regularly? Have you checked in over coffee? What are those things? What do they look like as well? If you can't go, yes, I'm confident with all those answers, probably there's some things you want to do first before you get anywhere else. And then really quickly, I'm so conscious that we're running out of time. If somebody gets a phone call from you saying that you want to employ them, this is the face that you want them to have. You want them to be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I really want to go and work with Ocumel UK. I've heard such great things about them. I love how they talk on Twitter. I am really connected with them when I volunteered, or I'd never heard of them before now, but I just love the work they do. You want people to feel like that. You're not going to be able to do that if all of your information about being an employee is about what they have to do. So if you ask for a load of essential stuff in your person spec, if you expect the earth of a fundraiser, if you expect people to work long hours, if you're you can't pay over the odds, you can't offer lots of enhanced maternity leave, or all those things, you're probably going to be at statutory level for a lot of those things. What can you do? What's your holiday entitlement? Actually, holiday entitlement means an awful lot to an awful lot of people, and although it doesn't cost you any more money, the impact on the individual is huge. Can you give them time for volunteering and professional development? That's, again, it's not costing you anything, but it's time. What time can you give them? Can you provide them with mentors? Is your training package really, really strong? Do you value them? Do you talk to them like human beings and with intrinsic value? What else is it that you can do for them? Jo, have you got any suggestions about how you can do that and really maximize it?
Yeah, I think sorry, I was actually replying to a question as you were talking then.
All right.
So all right, let me get the other head back on. Yeah, I think just sort of keeping people feel valued. Sorry, that's a really weak answer. Can you repeat the question, please,
yeah, no,
Kathryn?
it's about how would you add value to it? You can't pay people lots and lots and lots and lots of money. You're going to be curtailed with that that balance between, yes, it's okay to pay staff, but it's not okay to pay them double the going rate. And there are lots of free things that you can do, but what things do you think make people go, I want to work there?
Yeah, I think just the sort of environment that they that you create, which is why I'm quite a laid back manager, just because I think it's things like appointments, things like life, my child has a school assembly, different things will happen, and I think I like the term sort of like family friendly employer, if I saw it on job specs a few weeks ago. So I think that's the kind of thing that would appeal to me if I was looking for work. So yeah, I think just what kind of environment can you create for your employees so they want to work there, so that they know that they're valued, so that they know they can train. Normally we didn't learn about community CVS groups.
Yeah.
So ours is Slough CVS.
Yeah.
They've got tons of training. We learned about sort of like MVQ that you can do which doesn't cost an awful lot of money, but actually you can still develop people. So
Yes.
particularly if you're recruiting somebody at the beginning of their career, what are the kind of things
Yeah.
that they like? If you're doing something you like, you will be good at it.
Yes. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
how do you what are the areas of the job that they don't really like, and we as you grow, you find somebody else to sort of like
Yeah.
fill that part. So
I
just
definitely
sort of keep in.
Yeah, I work for an infrastructure organisation currently, and my last 2 interim chief execs also have been those. So if you've got a local one, Beacon is another one with all this kind of resources, definitely tapping into that. I'm just super conscious it's 27 minutes past, so I'm just going to click on prospective employees will research you, like everything that you see on the internet. They will look it up. The tone of voice thing has come out from communication specialists, knowing that actually how you speak will connect differently with people, your branding. But it's more than that. It is the words that you use on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, on Instagram, all the ones that I'm not on, all the young people. But they will do the research. They will find out about you. They will want to know what your maternity policy is, and whether, again, it's not about what you can offer them, it's how you speak to them. The ones that I just changed recently, the previous maternity policy, which is one I always go to first because I have children, so I understand it from a personal level, and everything was like, it is your responsibility to do this. It was like, I felt like if it was me, I would be a burden to the organisation because I was having a baby. And what we got an HR person to do was to humanize them and be like, you know what, getting pregnant is a really nerve-wracking, exciting and terrifying at that time, and it doesn't always happen for people either. So if you're struggling with this, here's a link to our IVF policy. Those kinds of things that are all interconnected because people are really complex, aren't they?
So yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for coming. It was lovely to see you guys here today, and thanks so much to Joe and Kathryn. So thanks everyone again. It was amazing to see you, and hopefully to see you at a future Beacon event soon.